Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. The morning sun glinted off the scratched chrome bumper of the 1967 Ford pickup truck as Eric Riley pulled into his reserved parking space at Summit Technologies. The contrast between his weathered vehicle and the surrounding luxury cars couldn't have been more stark. A sea of gleaming Mercedes, BMWs, and Teslas parted around the old truck like water around a stubborn rock. Eric's calloused fingers traced the steering wheel's worn leather, memories of working alongside his father flooding back. Every ding, every imperfection in the dash told a story, like the small dent above the glove compartment from when they dropped a wrench while replacing the carburetor. His father's voice echoed in his mind. Son, it ain't about how it looks, it's about how it runs. The newly installed security system's red light blinked steadily on the dashboard, a small concession to modern times after the recent string of break-ins in the executive parking lot. Eric had opted for a basic setup, front and rear dash cams with interior recording capability. Nothing fancy, just practical like everything else about the truck. As he gathered his briefcase from the passenger seat, his phone buzzed with a text from Lorena. Don't forget the board dinner tonight. And please tell me you're taking a proper car. Eric's thumb hovered over the screen, a slight frown creasing his forehead. Before he could respond, another message appeared. I mean it, Eric. I'm tired of explaining to everyone why my husband, the COO of Summit Technologies, insists on driving that embarrassing heap. The morning sun suddenly felt a little less warm. Eric tucked the phone into his pocket without responding and headed toward the building's entrance. At 43, he'd grown accustomed to Lorena's increasing disdain for his simple tastes, but it still stung. The transformation had been gradual. From the woman who'd once found his authenticity charming to someone who seemed to cringe at everything that made him who he was. The security guard, Mike, nodded as Eric approached the door. Morning, Mr. Riley. Still having trouble with that fuel pump? Nothing I can't handle, Eric replied, managing a smile. My father always said, a truck's like a marriage. Give it attention every day, or it'll leave you stranded. Mike finished with a chuckle. Your dad was quite a character. Eric's smile grew more genuine. That he was Mike? That he was? The elevator ride to the executive floor was interrupted at the third floor. William Elliott, the CFO, stepped in, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. The man started visibly when he saw Eric. Oh, Eric. Good morning, William stammered, quickly becoming engrossed in his phone. The tips of his ears had turned red, a tell Eric had noticed whenever William was uncomfortable. Morning, William. Everything all right with the Q3 projections? William's fingers tightened around his phone. Yes, all in order. I'll have the full report at the morning meeting. He practically bolted from the elevator when it reached their floor, leaving Eric to ponder the strange interaction. The executive suite was already buzzing with activity when Eric arrived. His assistant, Sandra, intercepted him with a stack of reports and a concerned expression. Sir, Mr. Lloyd called. He wants to move up the security platform review to this afternoon. Eric frowned. Paul Lloyd, his head of product development and longtime friend, had been pushing hard on the new software security platform launch. That wasn't scheduled until next week. What's the rush? He said something about market timing. Sandra replied, her expression suggesting she found it odd as well. And Mr. Russell and Mr. McDonald are both insisting on being present. Sergio Russell and Marvin McDonald, his VP of Sales and Chief Technology Officer respectively, had been acting strangely territorial about this project from the start. Eric made a mental note as he entered his office. The morning executive meeting was a study in subtle tensions. Eric watched his team carefully as they gathered around the conference table. Paul Lloyd arrived last, his usual confident swagger somewhat forced. Let's start with the security platform update, Eric suggested, noting how Paul exchanged quick glances with Sergio and Marvin. Actually, William Elliott interrupted, shuffling papers nervously. I think we should discuss the quarterly financials first. There are some irregularities we need to address. Irregularities? Eric leaned forward, but William wouldn't meet his eyes. Minor discrepancies, William said quickly. Nothing serious. Just some accounting adjustments we need to make before the board presentation. The meeting continued in this vein, with each executive seeming to dance around their topics. Eric felt like he was watching a carefully choreographed performance where he hadn't been given the script. After the meeting, Eric retreated to his office and found another text from Lorena. I've laid out your gray Armani suit for tonight. The board expects a certain image, and that includes their COO dressing appropriately. And for God's sake, take a car service? Eric's jaw tightened as he typed back. The truck is fine, Lorena. Dad and I rebuilt it together before he passed. The response was immediate. That's exactly the problem. You're living in the past, Eric. No wonder Jake doesn't want to spend time with you anymore. The mention of Jake felt like a physical blow. Eric's adopted son had been increasingly distant lately, canceling their weekend fishing trips and barely speaking to him at home. The boy who had once proudly helped him wash the truck now rolled his eyes at its very existence. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and reports, but Eric couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His executive team's behavior, Lorena's escalating criticism, Jake's distance, it all felt connected somehow, like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. During lunch, Eric walked down to the parking garage to check on the truck's fuel pump. As he approached, he noticed Paul Lloyd's reserve space was empty, despite the man insisting he had back-to-back meetings all afternoon. A few spaces over, Sergio Russell's car was missing too, though he claimed to be on a client call. Eric's phone buzzed again. Another text from Lorena. I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about the truck being about your father. Don't you think it's time to let go? We're not the same people we were 15 years ago. Sometimes I wonder if you've noticed that at all. Standing in the garage, surrounded by empty luxury cars, Eric felt the weight of change pressing down on him. He ran his hand along the truck's worn fender, remembering his father's words. Son, in a world of fancy wrapping paper, be the plain brown box that actually holds something worthwhile. The security camera's red light continued its steady blink, recording everything, waiting like a patient observer for events to unfold. Eric didn't know it yet, but that simple, practical addition to his father's truck would soon reveal just how much things had really changed. Eric Riley's 1967 Ford pickup truck looked particularly out of place among the manicured lawns and modernist mansions, especially now that it was pulled over on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking weakly against the growing darkness. Steam hissed from under the hood as Eric popped it open, the familiar smell of hot metal and oil filling his nostrils. The fuel pump had finally given out, just as he'd feared it would. He'd been meaning to replace it for weeks, but between the mounting tensions at work and the increasing strain at home, he'd let it slide. Come on, old girl, he muttered, reaching for the toolbox he always kept behind the seat. The interior dome light cast a soft glow as he rummaged through it, the dashcam's red light steadily blinking in his peripheral vision. The camera had become such a constant presence that he barely noticed it anymore. The sound of an approaching vehicle made him look up. A Range Rover Sport slowed as it passed, its xenon headlights momentarily blinding him. Eric raised a hand to shield his eyes, expecting the vehicle to continue past. Instead, it pulled up alongside his truck, its pristine black paint and chrome trim forming a stark contrast to his weather-beaten Ford. The passenger window rolled down with a soft whir, and Eric's heart stopped. Lorena sat in the passenger seat, wearing the designer dress she'd bought for the board dinner. Her perfectly styled hair and flawless makeup seemed to mock his current disheveled state. But it was the driver that made his blood run cold. Paul Lloyd, his supposed best friend and head of product development, sat behind the wheel. Well, Lorena's voice dripped with contempt, her red lips curling into a cruel smile. Look what we have here, Paul. My husband, the great COO of Summit Technologies, stranded in his precious piece of junk. Paul chuckled, but there was something mean in his eyes that Eric had never seen before. Fuel pump finally give out, boss? You've been nursing that thing along for weeks. Eric straightened up, trying to maintain his dignity despite the situation. Paul, what are you doing here with my wife? Oh, honey, Lorena laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Paul's not the only one. You really are slow on the uptake, aren't you? Still living in your fantasy world where loyalty means something. The words hit Eric like physical blows, but he forced himself to stay calm. What do you mean? Not the only one. She means, Paul interjected, his familiar friendly smile transformed into something ugly, that your entire executive team has had the pleasure of your wife's company. While you've been playing mechanic with your daddy's old truck, we've been showing Lorena what real success looks like. Eric's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Paul, you're my friend. We built this company together. No, Eric, Paul cut him off. You've been holding us back. Your outdated ideas about integrity and authenticity, they're costing us millions. The world doesn't work that way anymore. Lorena leaned closer to the window, her expensive perfume wafting out into the evening air. Look at this loser still driving that cheap truck, she said, her voice filled with a venom Eric had never heard before. Honey, just accept I'm sleeping with your entire executive team, or sleep in that rust bucket forever. Paul lifted his coffee cup, steam still rising from its contents. Here's a little something to wake you up, boss. The scalding liquid arced through the air, splashing across Eric's white dress shirt. The hot coffee soaked through immediately, burning his skin, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the betrayal he felt. Their laughter echoed off the mansion walls as the Range Rover pulled away, leaving Eric standing alone in the gathering darkness, coffee dripping from his ruined shirt. The truck's hazard lights continued their steady rhythm, matching the quiet blink of the dashcam that had captured every moment of the encounter. Eric stood there for a long moment, coffee cooling against his skin, mind racing to process what had just happened. 15 years of marriage to Lorena, decades of friendship with Paul. All of it seemed to be dissolving like morning mist. The executives he'd trusted, the company he'd helped build, even his own family. Everything was connected in ways he was only beginning to understand. The sound of another approaching vehicle made him tense, but it was just a local resident's Tesla gliding past, the driver barely sparing him a glance. Here he was in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, looking like exactly what Lorena had called him, a loser with a broken-down truck. But something stirred in Eric's mind as he watched the dashcam's steady red blink. The cameras he'd installed after the parking lot break-ins, they'd been running continuously for weeks. Every drive, every conversation in or around the truck had been recorded, including this one. With trembling fingers, he reached for his phone to call for a tow truck. As he waited, he found himself staring at the family photo he still kept as his lock screen. Himself, Lorena, and Jake at the lake house 2 summers ago. They were all smiling, Jake proudly holding up a fish they'd caught together. When had it all started to change? Had he really been so blind? The tow truck's headlights eventually illuminated the scene, its yellow rotating. As the operator loaded the Ford onto the flatbed, Eric couldn't help but think about his father's words from long ago. Son, sometimes the worst betrayals come wrapped in the prettiest packages. The dashcam continued its vigilant recording as the truck was secured for transport, its memory now holding evidence of a betrayal that went far deeper than Eric could have imagined. As he climbed into the tow truck's cab, leaving the gleaming mansions of Bell Canyon behind, he knew that this was just the beginning. The home office was dark except for the pale blue light from Eric's laptop screen. He connected the dashcam's memory card to his computer. The digital clock on his desk showed 11:47 p.m. He'd been at this for hours since getting the truck towed home, but time had lost all meaning as he delved deeper into the recordings. The first video he watched was from earlier that evening, the encounter with Lorena and Paul. Seeing it again from the camera's perspective made it even more surreal. The high-definition footage captured every detail. Lorena's contemptuous smile, Paul's smirking face, the arc of coffee as it splashed across his shirt. But it was what came before that evening that truly shook him to his core. Eric opened another file from 3 weeks ago. The camera had captured Lorena getting into William Elliott's Mercedes after a charity gala Eric had been too busy to attend. The CFO's hand had lingered too long on her lower back as he helped her into the car. Another file showed her emerging from Sergio Russell's downtown condo building at 7 a.m., wearing the same dress she'd had on at a board meeting the previous evening. Jesus Christ, Eric muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The cameras had been running continuously due to the recent car break-ins, inadvertently documenting a web of betrayal he never could have imagined. But as he continued watching, something else emerged. something potentially even more disturbing than his wife's infidelity. The cameras had captured numerous conversations in and around his truck, including several between his executives when they thought no one was listening. He clicked on a file from last Tuesday. The footage showed Paul Lloyd and Marvin McDonald in the parking garage, standing near Eric's truck while having what they thought was a private conversation. Eric's too caught up in his ethical concerns. Paul's voice came through clearly. He'll never agree to the backdoor we built into the security platform. Marvin glanced around nervously. The buyers are getting impatient. They need access to our clients' data before the quarter ends. Don't worry, Paul replied. Once the platform launches, Eric will take the fall when the breach is discovered. The board will have no choice but to remove him. Eric's hands clenched into fists as he opened file after file, each revealing new layers of betrayal. His executive team wasn't just sleeping with his wife. They were actively working to destroy everything he'd helped build. Another video showed William Elliott and Sergio Russell meeting in the parking lot at midnight. The financial reports have been altered, William was saying. When the security platform fails, the forensic accountants will find evidence suggesting Eric knew about the vulnerabilities and pushed for the launch anyway. What about his reputation for integrity? Sergio asked. William laughed. That's exactly what makes it perfect. No one will believe he'd checked the reports too carefully. His trust in his team will be his downfall. Eric leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The security platform project, their most profitable venture to date, was at the center of it all. They were planning to sacrifice the company's security, its reputation, and his career, all for their own gain. A soft knock at the office door made him jump. Eric, Lorena's voice called out. Are you coming to bed? In a while, he replied, keeping his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Don't tell me you're still sulking about earlier, she said through the door. It's not attractive. Eric stared at the door, thinking about the woman on the other side. The stranger who had replaced the person he'd married 15 years ago. The footage on his screen showed just how complete that transformation had been. I'm working, he said finally. Go ahead without me. He heard her sigh dramatically. Fine, be that way. Some of us have to maintain our image, you know. I have brunch with the board members' wives tomorrow. Her footsteps faded down the hallway as Eric turned back to his computer. A new file caught his eye, footage from just 2 days ago. The camera had captured a conversation between Paul and Lorena in the parking garage. Everything's set, Paul was saying, his hand resting possessively on Lorena's waist. Once the security platform launches next week, the backdoor will give our buyers access to everything. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, Eric will be finished, and the board will appoint you as the new CEO. Lorena asked, running her finger down Paul's tie. That's the plan. Williams arranged the financial records to implicate Eric in the security breach. Sergio's lined up buyers for the compromised data, and Marvin's team has built the vulnerabilities into the platform exactly as specified. What about Jake? Lorena's question made Eric's heart clench. Paul smirked. Your son? Once Eric's gone, he'll understand why his mother made the choices she did. Kids adapt, and he'll appreciate the upgrade in lifestyle. The casual way they discussed destroying not just his career, but his relationship with his adopted son made Eric's blood boil. He'd raised Jake as his own since the boy was 4 years old. Now at 16, Jake's recent distance made more sense. Lorena had been poisoning their relationship too. Eric opened another file, this one showing Marvin McDonald meeting with someone Eric didn't recognize in the parking lot late at night. The stranger handed Marvin a thick envelope. The first payment, the man said. The rest comes when we have access to Summit's client data through the security platform. You'll have it, Marvin assured him. Eric trusts me completely with the technical specifications. He has no idea we've built in a back door. The betrayal was comprehensive. His executives weren't just planning to force him out. They were selling out the company's clients, compromising their security for profit. The platform that was supposed to protect their clients' sensitive data had been deliberately designed to expose it. As more videos played across his screen, each one revealed another layer of betrayal. William Elliott appeared in one clip, huddled with Sergio Russell in the parking garage, discussing financial reports in hushed tones. In another, Marvin McDonald paced beside the truck during a late-night phone call, speaking anxiously about project timelines and system specifications that seemed deliberately compromised. The security platform project, Summit Technologies' most ambitious venture to date, kept coming up in these conversations. Something about its implementation wasn't right. The executive spoke about it in ways that made Eric's stomach turn, their words laden with hidden meanings and veiled threats. A text message lit up Eric's phone. Meeting tomorrow at 7 a.m. to review final security platform specs. Don't be late. Paul. Eric stared at the message, then back at his screen where another video played. This one showing Paul and Lorena together again, their intimate behavior making it clear their relationship went far beyond professional boundaries. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It had seeped into every aspect of his life, poisoning everything he'd built. The digital clock on his desk clicked past midnight as video after video confirmed his worst fears. His executive team wasn't just disloyal. They were actively working against him, their conversations revealing glimpses of a conspiracy he was only beginning to understand. And at the center of it all was his wife, the woman he'd trusted for 15 years, playing her own calculated role in his undoing. In the distance, he heard Lorena's laughter floating down from their bedroom. Probably another late-night phone call she thought he couldn't hear. The sound made him feel sick now, knowing what he knew. The cameras he'd installed to prevent car break-ins had revealed a different kind of theft, the methodical destruction of everything he held dear. The dashcam's red light continued its steady blink on his desk, like a metronome counting out the rhythm of his collapsing world. Each recorded frame seemed to mock the trust he'd placed in these people, the faith he'd had in his marriage, his company, his life. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Son, sometimes the hardest part isn't finding out the truth. It's deciding what to do once you know it. Eric buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the weight of everything he'd discovered. In just a few hours, his entire world had shattered. The old truck that Lorena had so often mocked had become an unwitting witness to her betrayal, and to something even darker that he was only beginning to glimpse. The night stretched ahead of him, full of damning videos still to watch, each one adding another crack to the foundation of his life. Tomorrow would come too soon, bringing with it decisions he wasn't ready to make. For now, all he could do was watch as the truth revealed itself, frame by devastating frame, in the glow of his computer screen. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to filter through the blinds of Eric's home office when Misty Kinney arrived. She used her emergency key, a holdover from when she'd worked for Eric's father, and found her boss exactly where she expected. Hunched over his computer, surrounded by empty coffee cups, his usually pristine shirt still stained with dried coffee. Misty paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. At 62, she'd spent more than half her life working for the Riley men, first for Eric's father, and now for Eric himself. She knew every expression that could cross her boss's face, but she'd never seen him look quite like this. Haunted, exhausted, yet somehow more alert than she'd ever seen him. "Sir, you look terrible," she said, setting a fresh coffee on his desk, carefully moving aside several papers covered in his handwriting. "Should I reschedule the board meeting?" Eric looked up, his eyes bloodshot but focused. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept at all. "No," he replied, his voice hoarse. "But I need your help with something." Misty straightened, smoothing her gray blazer, a gesture that had become habitual over her decades of service. "Of course, sir. What do you need?" Eric gestured to his computer screen, where a video was paused. "I need you to watch something. All of it. And then I need you to tell me if I've lost my mind." For the next hour, Misty stood behind Eric's chair, watching video after video from his truck's dashcam. Her normally impassive professional mask cracked several times. A sharp intake of breath at Lorena's cruel words in Bell Canyon. A soft, "Oh, dear Lord," when William Elliott appeared in a compromising position with Eric's wife. A muttered curse that would have shocked anyone who knew her only as the prim executive assistant. "That snake," she finally said, when Eric paused the latest video showing Paul Lloyd discussing project timelines with Marvin McDonald. "I never trusted him, even when your father hired him. Too smooth by half." Eric rubbed his tired eyes. "I need to understand exactly what they're planning." William's been manipulating the financial reports. I can see that from these conversations. But why? What's their endgame? Misty pulled up a chair, her mind already organizing the information with the efficiency that had made her invaluable to 2 generations of Rylus. Let me write this down. We need to map out who's doing what. She grabbed a legal pad and began making notes as Eric played more videos. William Elliott's face appeared again, this time in a heated discussion with Sergio Russell. The numbers have to be perfect, William was saying, nervously adjusting his tie. When this all goes down, the trail has to lead to Eric, not us. Relax, Sergio replied, his usual sales director confidence in full display. I've got buyers lined up who don't ask questions. Once we have control, we'll sell off the valuable parts piece by piece. No one will look too closely at the books by then. Misty's pen moved rapidly across the page, creating a web of connections. William Elliott, manipulating financial reports. Sergio Russell, meeting with competitors, probably arranging unauthorized sales of company assets. Marvin McDonald, he's doing something with the project timelines, sabotaging them somehow. And Paul Lloyd, Eric added, his voice thick with disgust, orchestrating everything while sleeping with my wife. Your father never trusted electronic security systems, Misty said, a hint of irony in her voice. He always said people would rely on them too much, forget to watch with their own eyes. But it's an electronic system that caught them. Dad would appreciate the irony. Eric agreed, then paused as a new thought struck him. Misty, you've been here longer than anyone. Who else might have noticed something? Someone who keeps their eyes open. Takes notes? Misty's eyes lit up. Della Conway, Paul Lloyd's secretary. I've seen her watching everything, writing things down. She's been with the company almost as long as I have, but Paul treats her like she's invisible. That's always a mistake. Eric leaned forward. Would she talk to us? She might, Misty said thoughtfully, especially after what happened last month. Paul threatened to fire her when she questioned some of his meeting arrangements. She came to me, worried about her pension. I advised her to document everything. They spent the next hour creating a detailed map of the conspiracy. William Elliott had been systematically altering financial reports, creating a paper trail that somehow implicated Eric. Sergio Russell had been meeting secretly with competitors, though the purpose wasn't yet clear. Marvin McDonald appeared to be sabotaging project timelines, particularly around the new security platform launch. The security platform keeps coming up in their conversations, Eric noted, playing another clip. They're planning something with it, something they don't want me to notice until it's too late. Misty studied their growing diagram. It's all connected somehow. The altered financials, the secret meetings, the rushed timelines. They're setting you up to take a fall. But for what? The morning light had grown stronger, highlighting the coffee stain on Eric's shirt. He needed to change before the board meeting, needed to shower, and make himself presentable. But first, he needed to understand exactly what he was facing. Can you get a message to Della Conway? He asked Misty. Privately? We need to talk to her before the board meeting. Misty was already reaching for her phone. I'll tell her to meet us at Carson's Diner. She gets coffee there every morning before work. Paul never goes there. Says it's too down market for his tastes. Eric managed a small smile. Like a certain 1967 Ford pickup truck? Exactly, Misty replied, her fingers moving efficiently over her phone's keyboard. Some people mistake simple for stupid. Your father taught me that's usually their biggest mistake. As Misty arranged the meeting, Eric stared at the conspiracy map they'd created. Each line represented a betrayal, each connection a calculated move against him. But now, at least, he wasn't facing it alone. The dashcam footage continued to play silently on his computer screen, an electronic witness to the unraveling of everything he'd trusted. But with each revelation, each new piece of the puzzle, Eric felt his shock and hurt being replaced by something else. A determination to understand exactly what these people had planned for his company, and why they believed they could get away with it. Carson's Diner sat on the unfashionable side of town, its neon sign flickering weakly in the early morning light. Della Conway was already there when Eric and Misty arrived, occupying a corner booth where she could see both entrances. Her usually perfect posture was tight with tension, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long since gone cold. Miss Conway, Misty said softly, sliding into the booth across from her. "Thank you for meeting us." Della's eyes darted to Eric, then back to Misty. She'd worked at Summit Technologies for 23 years, the last 8 as Paul Lloyd's personal secretary. Every morning, she arrived an hour before him to prepare his schedule, his coffee, his life. Every evening, she stayed late to clean up his messes, both literal and figurative. "He threatened my job when I questioned certain meetings," she revealed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I kept records of everything. That's what my mother taught me. Always keep records." A waitress approached their table, but Misty waved her away with a practiced gesture. Eric studied Della carefully. He'd seen her almost every day for years, but like Paul, he'd never really looked at her. Now he noticed the precise way she arranged the sugar packets on the table, the careful organization of her purse beside her, the small notebook visible inside it. "What kind of records?" he asked quietly. Della's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her purse. "Times, dates, places. Who came to see him, who he called, what he said when he thought no one was listening. The meetings he didn't want on his official calendar." She paused, glancing around the nearly empty diner. "The ones with your wife." Eric felt the familiar stab of pain at the mention of Lorena, but he pushed it aside. "Tell me about the security platform project." Something flickered in Della's eyes. Fear, maybe, or relief at finally being able to share her concerns. "They're rushing it. Mr. McDonald's team keeps raising red flags about vulnerabilities, but Mr. Lloyd insists they proceed anyway. He's been having secret meetings with people I've never seen before, always off-site, never on the official calendar." She pulled out her notebook, its pages dense with her neat handwriting. 3 weeks ago, he had a meeting at the Capitol Grill with a man who didn't give his name. Mr. Lloyd ordered a bottle of Camus Cabernet, $200 a bottle. He always does that when he's celebrating something. When they left, I heard the man say something about access being worth every penny. Misty was taking notes on her own pad, her pen moving swiftly. "What about William Elliott? Have you noticed anything unusual about his behavior?" Della's organization extended to her memory. "Last month, he started coming in at odd hours, always when he thought no one was around. But I stay late, and I saw him accessing financial records, making changes. He was nervous, jumping at every sound. That's not like him. Mr. Elliott is usually so controlled." She flipped through her notebook. "And Mr. Russell, he's been meeting with people from our competitors. Axis Solutions, Pinnacle Tech, others. Always claiming they're potential clients, but the discussions I've overheard, they're not about sales. They're about assets, valuations, transfer of ownership." Eric leaned forward. "Della, what exactly did Paul say when he threatened your job?" Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "I'd questioned a series of meetings he'd had with Mr. Elliott and Mr. Russell. They were discussing something called Operation Clean Slate. He found out I'd overheard them. He called me in his office and said," she swallowed hard. "He said that loyal employees know when to see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. He said he'd hate for someone my age to have to start over in this job market." "He underestimated you," Misty said softly. Della's chin lifted slightly. "Yes, he did. I've been keeping records of everything since then. Times, dates, conversations. She hesitated, then reached deeper into her purse. "I even started recording some of his calls." "Is that illegal?" "I don't know if that's illegal." Eric felt a surge of respect for this quiet, methodical woman who'd been gathering evidence while being treated as part of the office furniture. "You've been documenting his suspicious activities for months?" "Not just his," Della replied. "All of them. The way they've been acting, the secret meetings, the conversations they thought no one could hear. They've been setting you up, Mr. Riley. They're planning something with the security platform launch, something that will let them take control of the company. But they need you to take the fall when it all goes wrong." She pulled out more notebooks, each one labeled with dates and names. "The records show a pattern. They've been working together to undermine your position while preparing to sell off the company's most valuable assets to competitors. Mr. Elliott has been altering financial records to make it look like you've been negligent, maybe even complicit. Mr. Russell has been meeting with potential buyers. Mr. McDonald has been deliberately introducing vulnerabilities into the security platform while making it look like simple coding errors." Eric exchanged glances with Misty. Della's meticulous records confirmed what they'd pieced together from the dashcam footage, but added crucial details they'd missed. "Why are you showing us this now?" Eric asked gently. Della met his eyes for the first time. "Because my mother also taught me that there's a difference between loyalty to a person and loyalty to what's right. I've worked at Summit Technologies for 23 years. I was there when your father ran it. He used to say hello to me every morning, knew my name, asked about my mother when she was sick. The company meant something then. It wasn't just about money." She straightened in her seat, her voice growing stronger. "What they're planning, it's not just about forcing you out. They're going to destroy everything your father built. And I can't just sit quietly and watch that happen." The diner had begun to fill with its regular morning crowd. Construction workers, early shift nurses, people who lived in the real world that Paul Lloyd would never deign to visit. The waitress approached again, and this time Misty let her refill their cups. "We need to move carefully," Misty said, studying their notes. "One wrong move, and they'll destroy evidence." Eric nodded, thinking about the board meeting scheduled for later that morning. The pieces were starting to come together. The altered financials, the secret meetings, the rushed security platform launch. But they still didn't have the full picture. "Della," he said, "I need you to go back to work like everything's normal. Can you do that? Can you face Paul knowing what you know?" A small, fierce smile crossed Della's face. "Mr. Riley, I've been facing him every day for months while documenting his betrayal. I think I can manage a few more hours." The law offices of Jordan and Associates occupied the entire 47th floor of the city's second tallest building. Ron Jordan's corner office offered spectacular views of the downtown skyline. But this morning, he wasn't admiring the view. Instead, his attention was focused entirely on the documents spread across his mahogany conference table and the man sitting across from him. "The timing has to be perfect," Ron said, his years of legal experience evident in his measured tone. "What you've uncovered connects all the dots, but we need to handle this carefully. One wrong move, and they'll destroy evidence." Eric nodded, studying the array of papers before them. Della Conway's notebooks lay open, their pages filled with damning details. Printouts of still images from the dashcam footage were arranged chronologically, telling their own story of betrayal. Financial records that William Elliott thought he'd altered secretly had been recovered from system backups. "Walk me through it again," Eric said. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Ron picked up one of Della's notebooks. "Based on what we've pieced together, they've been planning this for months. The security platform project is the key. They've deliberately introduced vulnerabilities that will allow unauthorized access to client data. Once the breach is discovered, the altered financial records will suggest you knew about the problems but push for launch anyway. And while everyone's focused on the breach," Eric continued, "they'll start selling off the company's assets to competitors who are already lined up." "Exactly." Ron gestured to another document. "We've confirmed meetings between Sergio Russell and representatives from at least 3 competitor companies. They're not interested in the security platform. They want our client lists, our proprietary technology, our market position. Once the scandal hits and your reputation is destroyed, they'll be able to buy everything at fire sale prices." Eric's jaw tightened as he thought about Paul Lloyd's role in all this. His supposed best friend had orchestrated the whole scheme while sleeping with Eric's wife, using Lorena's position as a major shareholder through their marriage to add another layer of legitimacy to their plans. "What about the board meeting this morning?" Eric asked. Ron checked his watch. "They're expecting you to sign off on the final security platform specs. That would be the last piece they need, your signature approving a knowingly compromised system. Once they have that, they'll accelerate their timeline. But we're ready for them?" "Almost." Ron sorted through more papers. "We need to time this perfectly. Security teams are standing by to secure servers and documents. IT specialists are ready to lock down the system. But we have to let them show their hand first. If we move too soon, they'll claim it's all a misunderstanding, destroy the evidence, and find another way to come after you." Eric stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city where he'd spent his entire career building something he'd thought was worthwhile. The morning sun glinted off the buildings, reminding him of how it had sparkled on his truck's chrome bumper just yesterday morning, before everything had changed. "What about Lorena?" he asked quietly. Ron's reflection appeared beside him in the window. The divorce papers are ready. Once we expose the corporate conspiracy, her claims on company shares won't hold up. But Eric, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Are you sure about Jake? Eric's adopted son's face flashed in his mind. The little boy who'd once loved helping him wash the truck, the teenager who now barely acknowledged his existence. The betrayal had spread like poison through every aspect of his life, personal and professional. One thing at a time, Eric said finally, turning back to the conference table. Let's focus on the board meeting. How do we proceed? Ron gathered several documents into a folder. We need to get everything in place before you arrive. I'll have my team stationed throughout the building. Della Conway will ensure all the executives are present. She's already sent the meeting reminders. Misty will coordinate with security to ensure no one leaves once the meeting begins. And the evidence? We'll have it all ready, but we don't move until they make their play. Ron's expression was grave. They'll be expecting you to be rattled after last night's incident with the truck. They'll think you're vulnerable, maybe even desperate to prove yourself. Let them think that. Eric nodded, understanding the strategy. Let them believe their plan was working, that he was exactly where they wanted him, backed into a corner, his reputation and leadership in question. Let them make their final moves thinking victory was within their grasp. The morning sun had risen fully now, flooding the office with light. In a few hours, everything would change. But for now, Eric had to maintain the illusion that he was still in the dark, still trusting, still blind to the betrayal that had been unfolding around him. I should head home, he said, checking his watch. Need to change before the meeting. Can't show up in yesterday's coffee-stained shirt. Ron gathered the evidence into his briefcase. Remember, let them make the first move. Don't give them any reason to suspect you know. He paused, then added, and Eric, whatever happens in there, keep your focus on the big picture. Don't let the personal betrayals cloud your judgment. Eric thought of Lorena's cruel laughter in Bell Canyon, of Paul's smirking face as he threw the coffee, of Jake's increasing distance. The personal betrayals cut deep, but Ron was right. He couldn't let them distract him from what was really at stake. The elevator ride down was silent. Each man lost in thought about what the next few hours would bring. In the lobby, Ron turned to Eric one last time. They thought your greatest weakness was your trust in people, he said quietly. They never understood that trust, properly placed, can be your greatest strength. Eric thought of Misty's unwavering loyalty, of Della's quiet courage in documenting the conspiracy, of Ron's steady guidance in preparing their response. The betrayers hadn't counted on these allies, the people they'd overlooked or underestimated. Eric walked to his truck. His mind churned with everything he'd learned. The scope of betrayal seemed to grow with each passing hour. The dashcam's steady red light blinked as he started the engine, a reminder of how quickly certainty could crumble into chaos. The drive home was quiet, the city waking up around him, each familiar landmark now seeming somehow different. Everything had changed in the space of a day. His marriage, his company, his understanding of the people he'd trusted most. Even the weight of his father's restored truck felt different beneath him. The reliable hum of the engine provided little comfort this morning. Each intersection brought another decision. Turn right toward home to change his clothes. Turn left toward the office to confront his betrayers. Or simply keep driving until Bell Canyon and its bitter revelations disappeared in his rearview mirror. His driveway looked foreign when he pulled in. Lorena's car was gone. To where? He could only guess. The house loomed before him, a museum of false memories. Photos on the walls mocked him with images of smiling faces that had hidden so many lies. Here was Lorena at last year's charity gala, her arm linked with his while she was already betraying him. There was Jake's school photo, the boy's growing distance now cast in a darker light. In his bedroom, Eric stared at his reflection as he changed his stained shirt. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, evidence of the sleepless night spent watching his world unravel through the lens of a simple dashcam. The man in the mirror looked older than he had yesterday, weathered by revelations no one should have to face. The morning stretched before him like a dark road with no streetlights. Somewhere ahead lay the board meeting, with its hidden agendas and shadowed intentions. He had allies now, Misty's loyalty, Della's evidence, Ron's guidance, but alliances could be fragile things. He'd learned that lesson too well in the past 24 hours. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Son, sometimes the hardest thing is just showing up. The words carried new weight now. Showing up meant facing Lorena, Paul, and the others. It meant looking into the eyes of people who'd planned his destruction while smiling to his face. It meant walking into a room where every greeting would hide a knife. Eric straightened his fresh tie, the simple action feeling somehow final. The next few hours would change everything, but in ways he couldn't predict or control. All he knew for certain was that nothing would ever be the same. Not his marriage, not his company, not his understanding of trust itself. It was time to leave, to drive his father's old truck back into a world that had revealed itself to be far darker than he'd ever imagined. The dashcam would record whatever came next, its steady red light blinking like a metronome, counting down to an uncertain finale. The Summit Technologies boardroom filled early that morning. Ron Jordan's team had arrived first, setting up equipment with quiet efficiency, their movements choreographed from weeks of preparation. Security personnel positioned themselves discreetly, some in the adjacent rooms, others monitoring the building's exits, all carefully briefed on their roles. James Harrison, the longest-serving board member and Eric's father's oldest friend, arrived first among the board members. His weathered face showed concern as he noted the unusual security presence. "Quite a setup this morning, Ron," he remarked quietly to the company's head of legal affairs. Ron merely nodded, checking his watch. Everything had been timed precisely, coordinated through the early morning hours after Eric's meeting in his office. The SEC representatives waited in a nearby conference room, alerted but not yet visible. The executive team arrived as a group, a show of unified confidence that would soon crumble. Paul Lloyd led them, his Hermes tie perfectly knotted, his smile practiced and sure. William Elliott clutched his briefcase like a shield, while Sergio Russell and Marvin McDonald followed, engaged in what appeared to be casual conversation about golf scores. Lorena arrived last, making an entrance in a designer dress that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salary. She'd insisted on attending, citing her position as major shareholder through her marriage to Eric. Her Cartier watch, the one she'd bought herself with company money, as the financial records would soon reveal, glinted as she took her seat near the front. "Shouldn't we start?" she asked, her voice carrying that note of authority she'd cultivated. "Some of us have other commitments this morning." The other board members filed in, 12 men and women who'd trusted Eric's leadership, who'd known his father, who were about to witness the systematic betrayal of everything they'd built. They sensed something was different. The tension in the room was palpable. "Perhaps we should wait for Eric," suggested Sarah Chun, one of the newer board members. "The security platform launch is a significant." The door opened, and Eric entered. He'd changed from yesterday's coffee-stained shirt into a crisp white one, his tie perfectly knotted. Behind him came Misty Kinney, carrying a laptop, and Ron Jordan, whose presence caused a subtle shift in Paul's confident demeanor. "Good morning, everyone," Eric said, his voice steady as he took his place at the head of the table. The morning light caught the silver at his temples, evidence of stress that had accumulated over months of subtle betrayals. "Before we discuss the quarterly results, I'd like to share some security footage from recent weeks." Paul's hand tightened around his Mont Blanc pen. "Eric, we have a full agenda. The security platform launch won't take long." Eric cut him off, nodding to Misty, who dimmed the lights and connected her laptop to the display system. The first video filled the massive screen, Paul's Range Rover pulling up beside Eric's truck in Bell Canyon. The audio was crystal clear in the hushed room. "Look at this loser still driving that cheap truck," Lorena's voice rang out, followed by her cruel laugh. "Honey, just accept I'm sleeping with your entire executive team, or sleep in that rust bucket forever." Sarah Chin's sharp intake of breath broke the silence. James Harrison's face darkened with each word, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Then came the splash of coffee, the sound of laughter fading as they drove away. But Eric wasn't done. The videos continued, each more damning than the last. William Elliott and Sergio Russell in the parking garage. The financial reports are ready, William was saying, his nervousness evident. When the security platform fails, everything will point to Eric's negligence. Marvin McDonald speaking to unknown contacts. The vulnerabilities are built in exactly as specified. Once it launches, they'll have complete access. Meeting after meeting, conversation after conversation played out on the screen. Board members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from shock to anger as the extent of the betrayal became clear. "Turn it off," Lorena demanded, half rising from her seat. "This is ridiculous." "You can't." "Can't what?" Eric asked quietly. "Can't show the board how my executive team conspired to force me out? Can't reveal how they plan to sell off-company assets to competitors? Or can't expose how my wife helped orchestrate it all?" James Harrison's voice trembled with rage as he addressed William Elliott. "I gave you your first job in finance. I recommended you for CFO. And this is how you repay that trust?" The videos continued relentlessly. Secret meetings in restaurants, late-night conversations in the parking garage, phone calls in empty offices. Each executive's face grew paler as their betrayal was exposed in high definition, their own words condemning them. Ron Jordan began distributing documents to the board members, financial records, technical specifications, meeting notes, all carefully organized to support the video evidence. The SEC representatives entered quietly, taking positions around the room. "This isn't just about personal betrayal," Eric continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "This is about the systematic attempt to destroy everything my father built. The security platform wasn't just rushed, it was deliberately compromised. The financial reports weren't just unclear, they were intentionally falsified. And while I would take the fall, they planned to sell our company piece by piece to competitors who were already lined up." The executives began to turn on each other, their unified front crumbling. "It was Paul's idea," William stammered. "He said we'd all be taken care of." "Shut up," Paul snarled. "You were happy enough with the arrangement when we discussed your offshore account." "My God," Saracen whispered, examining a particularly damning document. "They were going to sell our client data. The security platform was designed to fail." Security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, securing doors and positioning themselves behind the accused executives. Ron Jordan stood, his presence commanding attention. Given the evidence presented, he announced, "The SEC has some questions. We'll need to secure all documents and devices. Please remain seated while security collects your badges and phones." The next few minutes unfolded with methodical precision. Access badges were collected. Phones were confiscated. Laptops were secured. The executives who had seemed so powerful moments ago now sat silent, their arrogance replaced by fear. Lorena rose, her designer dress suddenly seeming like costume jewelry, flashy but fundamentally false. "You planned this," she accused as security moved to escort her from the room. "You and that stupid truck." Eric met her gaze, seeing not the woman he'd loved for 15 years, but a stranger wearing her face. "No," he replied calmly. "You did this to yourself. I just had good timing." James Harrison approached Eric as the accused were led away. "David would be proud," he said, referring to Eric's father. "He always said the truth would out." The remaining board members gathered around Eric, their faces grave. There would be no discussion of quarterly results today. They had a company to save. The next 48 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice. Security teams moved methodically through the building, securing offices and evidence. IT specialists locked down systems, preventing any possible destruction of data. The recordings had exposed more than just affairs and betrayals. They had revealed a complex web of corporate sabotage that needed to be carefully untangled. Ron Jordan's office became command central, with different teams handling various aspects of the crisis. The legal team occupied the main conference room, where Della Conway's meticulous records proved invaluable. Her notebooks contained dates, times, conversations, a paper trail that supported every revelation from the dashcam footage. "Look at this," she said, pointing to an entry from 3 months ago. "Paul ordered Camus Cabernet that night. $200 a bottle. He was celebrating because William had finished altering the Q3 financials. The IT security team worked from a makeshift command center in the adjacent office. They discovered the full extent of the security platform's compromised code, deliberate vulnerabilities that would have allowed massive data theft. They buried it deep, the lead technician explained to Eric. If we hadn't caught this before launch, our client's data would have been completely exposed. The HR team dealt with the human cost. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering about the morning's events. The sight of their top executives being escorted out had sent shockwaves through the building. Misty took charge of internal communications, her steady presence helping to calm fears. Yes, there will be changes, she told department heads. But the company is strong. Your jobs are secure. The SEC investigators worked efficiently, their questions precise and targeted. William Elliott broke first, confessing everything. His testimony implicated the others, revealing the full scope of their plans. The security platform had been deliberately compromised to allow data theft. Financial records had been systematically altered to hide irregularities. Secret meetings with competitors had arranged the sale of company assets. Each executive had offshore accounts ready to receive their payoffs. Lorena's role proved particularly damaging. The recordings captured her not just as a willing participant, but as an active orchestrator. She had used her position to manipulate board members, gather information, and pressure people into compliance. By evening, the story had broken in the financial press. Summit Technologies executives arrested read the headlines. The company's stock price fluctuated wildly as the market digested the news. James Harrison called an emergency board meeting to address the crisis. We need to show strength, he insisted. Show our clients their trust wasn't misplaced. Ron Jordan agreed, presenting a preliminary strategy. We've caught this in time. The security platform can be fixed. The financial records can be corrected. But we need to move quickly. As night fell, Eric stood at his office window, looking out over the city. The dashcam footage played silently on a screen behind him, an endless loop of truth that had saved his father's legacy. The transformation of Summit Technologies became a case study in corporate rehabilitation. Over the next 6 months, Eric worked with Ron Jordan to restructure every aspect of the company. Della Conway's promotion to chief of staff sent a clear message. Integrity would be rewarded. Her first initiative was a comprehensive oversight system that made transparency mandatory at all levels. Your father used to say that sunshine is the best disinfectant, she told Eric as they reviewed the new procedures. Every transaction, every meeting, every decision will have a clear paper trail. The technical team rebuilt the security platform from scratch, this time with multiple layers of oversight. Each line of code was reviewed, each feature tested extensively. When it finally launched, 3 months later than originally planned, it was acclaimed as the most secure platform in the industry. The human cost was harder to measure. Employees who had trusted the old executive team struggled to adapt to new leadership. Eric made a point of being more visible, more accessible. My father built this company on relationships, he explained during a company-wide meeting. Not just business relationships, but human ones. We lost sight of that. We won't make that mistake again. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, the evidence too overwhelming for Lorena to fight. Her attempts to claim company shares were dismissed when her role in the corporate sabotage came to light. She left with nothing but her designer clothes and the Cartier watch that had become a symbol of her transformation. Jake's situation proved the most challenging. At 16, he struggled to understand the collapse of his world. The boy who had once helped wash the old Ford truck now moved through the house like a ghost, barely speaking to either parent. After weeks of counseling sessions and legal consultations, Eric made his difficult decision. While he couldn't continue as Jake's father figure, the betrayal had cut too deep. He would ensure the boy's future was secure. Working with Ron Jordan and an independent trustee, Eric established a comprehensive trust fund. It would cover Jake's education through graduate school if he chose, provide a down payment for his first home, and offer quarterly distributions once he reached 25. The boy didn't choose any of this, Eric explained to James Harrison, who had questioned such generosity. He shouldn't suffer for his mother's choices. The trust document, included a letter Eric had written to Jake. I won't pretend the last 15 years didn't happen. You were my son in every way that mattered, and part of me will always see you that way. I hope someday you'll understand that integrity isn't about blood, it's about choices. Your future is secure. What you make of it will be up to you. 1 year after the boardroom revelation, Summit Technologies had emerged stronger. The new executive team, chosen for character as much as capability, had restored client confidence. The stock price had recovered and grown. The company's reputation for integrity attracted top talent and new clients. Eric still drove the same 1967 Ford pickup truck to work. Its scratched chrome and worn leather told a story of authenticity in a world of shallow appearances. The Dashcam still recorded faithfully, though its footage now captured only ordinary moments, a daily reminder that truth doesn't need to be flashy to be powerful. On his father's birthday, Eric drove to the cemetery, parking the truck in the quiet morning light. The years had added more silver to his hair, but his eyes were clear and peaceful as he sat in silence. "You were right, Dad," he said quietly. "Sometimes the simple things save us." The dashcam's small red light blinked steadily, recording the moment. Not because it needed to, but because that's what it was designed to do, capture truth, no matter how uncomfortable or revealing it might be. The simple security system that had revealed so much continued its vigilant watch, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful tools are the ones others underestimate. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about preserving something genuine in a world that too often settled for less. Epilogue, 5 years later. The exclusive Bell Canyon neighborhood had changed little in the 5 years since Eric's truck had broken down on its manicured streets. The same sprawling estates still lined the winding roads, their perfectly maintained lawns and architectural flourishes testifying to their owners' wealth and status. But for Lorena Dickerson, she'd reverted to her maiden name after the divorce. The view from her small apartment window in a decidedly less prestigious valley village told a different story. At 47, the years hadn't been kind to the woman who had once commanded attention in Summit Technologies' boardroom. Her designer clothes had long since been sold to cover legal fees. Her Cartier watch pawned during one of many financial crises. The corporate sabotage charges had made finding employment nearly impossible. It turned out that being implicated in one of the decade's most notorious attempted corporate takeovers wasn't great for one's resume. She stood at her window, watching the morning traffic crawl past strip malls and discount stores, a far cry from the luxury boutiques she'd once frequented. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake, now 21 and in his 3rd year at Stanford. "Can't make it to lunch today. Midterms coming up. Maybe next month?" Lorena's fingers hovered over the phone's cracked screen. Their relationship had become a series of canceled plans and brief text exchanges. The trust fund Eric had established ensured Jake's education and future, but it couldn't repair the damage her choices had caused. Her son had grown into a young man who viewed her with a mixture of pity and carefully controlled anger. Across town, in a federal correctional facility's minimum security wing, Paul Lloyd stared at the ceiling of his cell. 3 years into his 7-year sentence for corporate fraud, securities violations, and conspiracy, the former executive had plenty of time to reflect on how spectacularly his plans had unraveled. His cellmate, a former hedge fund manager convicted of insider trading, was reading the Wall Street Journal, a permitted luxury in their white-collar prison. "Hey, Lloyd," he called out, "your old company's in the news again. Summit Technologies just acquired their biggest competitor. Stock's up 30%. Paul rolled over, facing the wall. The company he'd tried to destroy was now worth 10 times what it had been under his tenure. The security platform he'd attempted to compromise had become the industry standard, its reputation for integrity making it the preferred choice for government and corporate clients worldwide. William Elliott had fared slightly better, his early cooperation with prosecutors earning him a lighter sentence. Now working as a night manager at a chain hotel in Phoenix, he found a kind of peace in the simple honesty of balancing the day's receipts. His offshore accounts had been seized, his assets forfeit, but at least he slept better than he had during those months of cooking Summit's books. Sergio Russell had fled to a country without an extradition treaty, but his victory proved hollow. Cut off from his family and former life, he spent his days in a luxury that felt more like exile than escape. His attempts to start new ventures failed. It turned out his success had always depended more on stealing others' ideas than generating his own. Marvin McDonald had avoided prison by turning state's evidence, but his reputation in the tech world was destroyed. He taught basic coding at a community college in Oregon, his students unaware that their seemingly modest instructor had once nearly pulled off one of the biggest corporate sabotage schemes in recent history. Back at Summit Technologies, the years had brought changes that would have made David Riley proud. The company occupied the same building, but its culture had been transformed. The executive parking lot, once filled with luxury cars, now displayed a more modest array of vehicles. Eric's 1967 Ford pickup still occupied its spot, its presence a daily reminder of the values that had saved the company. Della Conway, in her role as chief of staff, had implemented oversight procedures that became a model for corporate governance. Business schools now taught the Summit standards as an example of how to build transparency into corporate culture. Your father always said character reveals itself in the details, she reminded Eric during a recent executive meeting. These quarterly compliance reports might seem tedious, but they're what keep us honest. Misty Kinney had finally retired, though she still came in one day a week to mentor her replacement. Someone needs to teach the next generation the difference between loyalty to a person and loyalty to principles, she'd explained. James Harrison, semi-retired but still serving as chairman emeritus, often told new employees the story of the Dashcam footage. Never underestimate simple integrity became his favorite saying. The fanciest security system in the world couldn't have done what that basic camera did. Ron Jordan's law firm had grown significantly, its reputation for handling complex corporate governance issues enhanced by the Summit case. He'd written a book about the experience, Simple Truth, How Corporate Integrity Saved Summit Technologies, which became required reading in business ethics courses. The Dashcam footage itself had been preserved in the company's archives, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. Sometimes, during orientation, new executives were shown selected clips, not to shame the perpetrators, but to demonstrate how integrity wasn't just a buzzword at Summit Technologies. Eric himself had changed, though in more subtle ways. The silver in his hair had spread, and lines around his eyes testified to years of responsibility. But there was a peace in his bearing that hadn't been there before. He'd never remarried, focusing instead on rebuilding his father's company into something even stronger. Jake had surprised everyone by interning at Summit during his college summers, not in the executive offices, but in the IT department. He'd inherited his adoptive father's interest in how things worked, spending hours learning about system security and code integrity. The trust fund is generous, he'd told Eric during a rare lunch together. But I want to earn my own way. Like you did. The old Ford truck had become something of a legend in corporate circles. Magazine articles about Summit's transformation often featured photos of it parked among newer vehicles, using it as a metaphor for the company's commitment to substance over style. The Dashcam still recorded faithfully, though its footage now captured only ordinary moments, sunrise commutes, casual conversations, the daily rhythm of a company built on trust. Sometimes, in the quiet of early morning, Eric would arrive early and sit in the truck, remembering. One such morning, 5 years to the day after the boardroom revelation, Eric parked in his usual spot and noticed another vehicle pulling in nearby. It was Jake, arriving early for his summer internship, driving a used pickup truck he'd bought with his own savings. "Thought I might help you wash it this weekend," Jake said, nodding toward Eric's truck. "Like we used to." Eric smiled, noting how the morning sun caught the scratches on both their truck's chrome bumpers. Some things came full circle if you gave them time. That evening, Eric drove to the cemetery, parking in his usual spot near his father's grave. The years had given him perspective on everything that had happened, the betrayals, the losses, the rebuilding. But they'd also shown him something his father had tried to teach him all along. Integrity wasn't just a personal virtue, it was a practical tool, as essential as any security system. The Dashcam's red light blinked steadily in the gathering dusk, still recording, still bearing witness. not because it needed to, but because that's what it was designed to do, capture truth, no matter how uncomfortable or revealing it might be. In her small Valley Village apartment, Lorena watched the sunset paint the urban sprawl in deceptively golden hues. Her phone showed a news alert about Summit's latest acquisition. The accompanying photo showed Eric standing proudly beside his old truck, Jake next to him, both smiling with a genuine happiness that made her chest ache. She thought about the Cartier watch, now probably adorning someone else's wrist, and all it had represented: the hollow allure of appearance over substance, the betrayal of trust for temporary gain. She'd traded authentic happiness for artificial success, and the price had been higher than she'd ever imagined. Paul Lloyd, in his prison cell, had similar thoughts as he read about his former company's success. The security platform he'd tried to compromise now protected government agencies, financial institutions, and corporations worldwide. His attempt to exploit its vulnerabilities had instead led to its becoming the most trusted system in the industry. Summit Technologies had not only survived but thrived, its stock price and reputation reaching heights that would have seemed impossible during his tenure. The company's commitment to integrity, once seen as old-fashioned, had become its greatest selling point in a world increasingly concerned with data security and corporate responsibility. The story of Summit's transformation had become a cautionary tale in business schools, a reminder that corporate culture wasn't just about profits and power. The simple dashcam that had exposed the conspiracy was now displayed in the company's lobby, alongside David Riley's original business license, symbols of how truth, however simply packaged, could overcome even the most sophisticated deception. As night fell over the city, Eric started his truck's engine, its familiar rumble a comfort in the cemetery's silence. The dashcam's steady light reminded him of his father's words, "Sometimes the simple things save us." He thought about all that had changed in 5 years. The company's growth, Jake's maturation, his own journey from betrayed husband and leader to something stronger, more grounded. The betrayers had lost everything they'd schemed to gain, while the simple values they'd mocked had proven more powerful than any corporate intrigue. The old truck carried him home through the darkening city, its basic security system still faithfully recording. Not because anyone was plotting against him now, but because truth, like integrity itself, worked best when it was simply part of who you were, operating steadily in the background of every day, ready when needed but never flashy, never false. Some said Eric's insistence on driving the old truck was stubborn pride. Others called it a publicity stunt. But for those who really understood Jake, Della, Misty, Ron, and the others who'd stood by him, it was simply Eric being Eric, as authentic as his father had raised him to be. The dashcam's light blinked on, recording truth in its simple, unchanging way, while somewhere in her small apartment, Lorena watched the same evening sky, understanding too late that some things, trust, integrity, authentic love, once broken, could never be replaced, no matter how